Hey everyone, welcome to our final week of lectures. And these lectures are going to be about government in the great state of the nation of the Republic of California. Eureka! So let's just give us a little bit of facts. California is one of the largest countries in the world by GDP. Now, it's not actually a country, of course. California is part of another country, the United States. But its GDP, if you were to remove it from the United States, would still be in the top 10 GDPs. That's gross domestic products, goods and services produced, or the value of goods and services produced in a country in a given year. California's would be 2.7 trillion. That is larger than the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom. The population of California is close to 40 million people, and 1 in 8 United States residents live in California, over a quarter of which are foreign born. Now, California is also the third largest state in the Union. That's after Texas, of course. California is smaller than Texas. That's just a fact. Y'all have to live with that. I'm okay with it. What I'm not okay with is talking about Alaska. Let's never bring up Alaska. Alaska's uncomfortable. Now, let me just show you a bit about California's current population. Currently, the majority population in California is white, but this is very narrow. And it is projected that by 2060, the Hispanic population will be the largest population in California. So, California is, of course, a destination state for many immigrants from Latin America. Many immigrants from Latin America have historical ties to the state. Many family members live in Los Angeles, for instance. Many family members live in San Diego or San Francisco. So, we can only expect that particular population to grow. Now, here's a population density map of California because you often see these maps of California and it looks like blue dots in a sea of red, right? You see all these areas that lean Republican, and it's just you wonder, well, how is California such a blue state? And the answer is that where the majority of people are concentrated, that is around San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, those areas and those voters tend to vote very, very Democratic. So the state tends to stay that way. You can see here in Riverside, we're about right here at the edge of Riverside County, but there's not a lot of people who live east of Riverside towards the Arizona border. That's true of most of Central California, though you have a central corridor right here. Now, California is quote unquote discovered by the Spanish in 1542. And the Spanish established what many of you now know as the mission settlement system along the coast from Baja California to Northern California. And the problem with the Spanish colonial model is that there were not a lot of Spaniards in California. It was a very large territory, very far removed from the Spanish colonial centers of Mexico and Mexico City. And so you had what were mainly a system of Catholic churches up and down California. Now, after Mexico secedes from Spain in 1821, Mexico or California became part of Mexico. And in 1836, the non Indian population of the Los Angeles area was about 2,000, with the American population that is. I actually don't know what that means, so ignore that. And in 1842, the population of San Francisco was about 16, or was about 160 people. Now, following the Mexican American War, the United States essentially blackmailed Mexico into giving California to them, and the discovery of gold brings this wave of American settlers to California. Now, the state population around the American Civil War or the Mexican American War was about 10,000 people, not a lot. Now, after the gold rush, it becomes 120,000 people. The first state constitution was written shortly after integration into the United States in 1848 and 1849, and it became an official state in 1850. Still, it was really, really kind of a whole lot of nothing. There was this vast wilderness, not a lot of people in it, and it was very isolated, very difficult to travel. And you see that today. California has a very unique geography. There's a lot of mountains, there's a lot of deserts, there's a lot of wide open spaces. And there's thousands of miles, though, of ocean travel along the coast. And so there's this problem also. California is one of the newest states when it's integrated into the Union in 1850. And it's very far removed from the rest of the United States. There's not a lot between California and the rest of the country. So they needed to find a way to connect it to the rest of the country. This led to the Transcontinental Railroad, which mainly used imported Chinese labor. Many of you probably remember this from your California history classes. These were essentially indentured servants brought over from China and then systematically excluded from American politics. Now, along with the importation and the immigration of many Chinese people to California, you saw the rise of a particular new class of baron and capitalist, and these are the railroad barons. Now, this really starts off kind of logically. Here's a map. You see all of these pink areas. These are parts of the United States that are recognized as states. What is between that and California are these territories, places that are part of the United States but are not states. There's not a lot of people there. There's not a lot of towns there. And it's this vast wilderness. And so there had to be a way to connect California to the rest of the country. Hence, the fastest way to get around at the time, railroads. Railroads became very important to California in moving people to California and goods out of California and connecting it to the rest of the country. And because railroads were so important, the people who owned these railroads were extremely important. Now, this is a map of the Union and Central Railroads. Union and Central Railroads, owned by Pacific Railroads, became very important to California, and in particular, this business of railroads. Because railroads were so important and they brought so much money into California, they could use that to buy a lot of influence. So the railroads, and just take a look at this map, you can see how it kind of looks like a bunch of snakes or a bunch of tendrils or a bunch of tentacles. They became popularly known as the octopus. Here you see a political cartoon entitled The Curse of California. Railroad barons, because they had not only so much money, but so much influence and so much importance in California's economy, would just buy almost every politician. They would buy all the land. They would try to basically own California. And Californians are, of course, very afraid of these railroad companies because, after all, if they're buying everything, then nothing is left for the rest of us, right? So California begins to look at other parts of the United States that are dealing with this problem of monopoly, that are dealing with this problem of big businesses coming into their states and trying to buy everything. And they notice that direct democracy is a way to thwart the interest of these railroads. So the railroads and just their ability to buy everything created a backlash. And the backlash resulted in the system we have today, where Californians actually have more say in their government than many other states in the Union. So, some of these policies and some of these long-lasting legacies we see in California today. There's usually a distrust of political parties in California, and there are attempts to make government more efficient. These are you can see these manifested in direct primary elections, where any member of any party can run in a primary. These are open primaries. So Republican, Democrat, whatever, what have you, you can run in a primary. And what happens then is that the top two vote getters in these primaries advance to the next office. Anyone can run, and no one needs approval from their political party. Why is that? Well, it's because in the era of the railroad baron, the barons owned the political parties and they owned the political party establishment, and that could keep particular people out of running for office. There are nonpartisan officials. Some local elections they don't have to run, or people don't have to run as part of a political party, and expanding the voter base was another way to limit the influence of these barons, which is why women were granted the right to vote, to expand the voter base. Now, this still excluded some individuals. I talked earlier about the Chinese population and how it was systematically excluded from politics. This is largely true. Now, in the 1930s, democracy spreads even further. Or, I'm sorry, direct democracy grows even further. The Dust Bowl leads to many new people coming to California, and this is really shown in the novel The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And then, of course, you had this boom of industry and growth in World War II. And then you had this massive expansion of infrastructure in California, new roads and highways, the rise of the UC system, and of course, irrigation and farmland expansion, and which really allows California to become one of the greatest suppliers of food to the rest of the United States. Now, why is direct democracy tied to all of this? Let's come back a few slides. So, because the railroads had been buying the legislature and the governors and the politicians and the land, progressives wanted, or people, I should say, just people, wanted a way to be able to undercut the power of money in politics. And the way to do that was to give voters more opportunities to influence government. So that is, if the political parties cannot exclude people from running for office, well, then that's one way that money doesn't influence that political party, right? If government, or if, let me see, if more people can vote and these people are not tied to the railroad companies, then railroad influence is kind of undercut. And that's the idea in direct democracy. It's to undercut the influence of money on politics by allowing people to vote directly for many, many, many issues. It's basically giving more people opportunities to vote so that there is more influence from the bottom in politics than there is from influence from the top. Instead of this elite money being poured into government and kind of buying government, people from below have all these different pressure points where they can exert their influence. The result of all of this is this weird hybrid government where we've got a representative democracy and some direct democracy. So, again, this is a long historical trend in California. What does it mean? Well, it means we still send state legislatures, state senators, governors, other officials to represent us. But we also have opportunity in California to vote directly on a lot of laws. So in California, we do vote on policy. We vote on policy quite a bit. There's particular ballot initiatives and ballot referendums and the recall, and we can do all of these things that people in other states can't. And that is the aspect of direct democracy that we see in California. Now, this is not to say California is the only state where this could happen. Here you see that there are quite a few states in the United States which use the three mechanisms Californians have to influence their government. They can use initiatives, referendums, and constitutional amendments in all of the states that you see in blue. However, you see a few states where state laws can only be changed by referendum, and some states where it can only be changed by constitutional amendment. Now, there are three types of direct democracy. People use the terms initiatives and propositions like they're the same thing, but they're a little different. Let's talk first about mandatory referendums, though. This is when a state government or the state government makes an amendment to the state constitution, and over 50% of the population, that is a majority of the population, has to approve this amendment. So the legislature starts the amendment, they write the amendment, and the voters approve that amendment, yes or no. They approve the amendment, yes or no. And it's not the case that people come and directly write this amendment. In this respect, it's still a representative process where we send people to write this stuff, but it is direct in that the legislature itself cannot approve it. It needs the people to kind of give it its rubber stamp to approve this change. Now, optional referendums are referendums where people can vote to overturn laws. And this is a check that voters can use on the state government to reject laws that they don't like. That's an optional referendum. Now, coming back to an initiative, this is where the general population can create a new amendment or write a law or change an existing law. Now, this is what we think of when we think of the proposition system, right? Like you see on your ballot, you have all of these measures, all of these different props, and those are initiatives. There are no restrictions on what types of laws can be passed or what they have to say. There are, however, a few hurdles that initiatives have to pass in order to get on the ballot. So, first, you have to write whatever you want that new law, that new policy, that new amendment to say. So, you can get help or you can consult an official state office to help you write this law. Then you have to submit that law to the Attorney General. And then the Attorney General's office provides a title and a 100-word summary of that law. Now, they can't change what you write in the law, but they have to provide that summary. Then you need to collect signatures. So you need at least 5% of the amount of people who voted in the last governor's election to sign a piece of paper saying they approve of your law, they want your law, in order for that law to get on the ballot. Now, for a constitutional amendment, you need about 8%. That's a little larger. And then you submit that to the state, it goes on the ballots, and if it passes, it's a law. Congratulations, California. We will pick up our next video here talking about the state legislature.